Hello, everyone, and thanks so much for joining here. I have MBADV's Maria Brunn and Dorthe and LA-based designer Alex Reed. I'm Sage Roebuck, the Programs and Development Coordinator for the MAC Center, a multidisciplinary center based in Los Angeles and housed within three significant architectures of the Austrian-American architect R.M. Schindler. Today, we're going to have a dialogue around the work MBADV has on display in our current exhibition at the Schindler House in West Hollywood, which is autonomous design. Those pieces are 4 pieces that make up comparing conditions, tall boy relief and low relief. Autonomous design was curated by Priscilla Fraser and works in collaboration with the Danish Arts Foundation. It's open until September 12th, 2021. I'm going to begin with everyone's bios and then pass it along to MBADV to describe the work that they have in the show. MBADV is a Copenhagen-based studio founded in 2013 by furniture designer Maria Brunn and architect Dorthe. Intrigued by the notion of dialogue, MBADV often focuses on abstractions like idioms, functional hybrids, and on the aesthetics of materials and form in relation to surrounding spaces, all created with attention to the crafted detail. MBADV is represented by UK-based gallery Fumi. Alex Reed is an LA-based ceramics designer. He earned his BFA from the New York State College of Ceramics at Alfred University in 2011. Upon graduating, he was awarded the Fogelberg Fellowship from the Northern Clay Center. Alex's work spans independent studio production and ceramic design for industry, having worked at Rookwood Pottery in Ohio and Heath Ceramics in California. Alex writes, "I strive to cultivate a practice that encompasses both commercial work for industry and independent speculative work. My latest work proposes a domestic utopia forever slipping just over the horizon. I've combined craft training with technical insights from commercial ceramics manufacturing in an effort to flatten seemingly disparate techniques and notions of value." We're so excited to have the 3 of you here today. Thank you so much for participating, and I hope I can pass it along to MBADV to hear a bit more about the work that you have in autonomous design right now.
Thank you. What should we begin with, Maria? Relief?
Yeah. Can we start?
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, so relief. This is Relief Tall Boy. You see in the foreground. Like the inspiration comes from architectural elements like doors and arches and old ornaments on buildings. But in this, we've tried to make these reliefs 3-dimensional, so they're like exploded. So each wooden plate like has a cut, and when you then put them next to each other, you get like this space within. And in this case, in the Tall Boy, it's actually drawers where you can actually store something in it, which is not always the case with the things that we make. Yeah, it's made from steel, hammer-tone steel, and Douglas fir. And what's the? I don't remember what the drawers. What is that? What does that?
It's the blackened steel.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
It has a more refined name, right?
Yes.
Just don't remember it.
Oh.
Yeah. Do you have something to add, Maria?
I think in the beginning, you had kind of mentioned that these pieces are small, like architecture studies in a way, and they become kind of they In this case, they are curated by Priscilla Fraser for this exhibition, and they have this kind of relationship to the house almost, or that Priscilla must have spotted when she first saw the pieces in Copenhagen, because they have this strict rationality that really refers to the Schindler's House, where the panels and the repetition, how do you say, the repetition of the beams almost becomes like a rhythm in the space, and that's kind of the same thing that we do in the relief furniture. It is a repetition and a rhythm that makes out the furniture. For us, it was quite important that these two pieces stood freely. They were kind of pulled out in the space, so that the viewers were able to interact with the piece all the way around it and kind of experience its backsides, and because it has quite a different expression when you move around it. And it's fascinating in a way that it's only held together by these brackets in the top and in the bottom. So if you release them, everything kind of explodes.
There's a nice relationship, I think, in this piece, like in the house too, because one of the things I love about the house is you can, as kind of like an amateur, one can go and understand how it's constructed fairly easily, and it's, tectonics are visible, and there's something kind of similar happening in this piece that I think is exciting.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. You can really read how it's built, and it's so simple. But I think for Maria and I as well, when we made it, it was surprising how weird it looks in the end. Like, it's so straightforward, and I mean, you know, these old doors that have all of these ornaments on it, and you can just like explode them, and then you actually have this weird piece that that has a language of its own and doesn't really relate maybe to the inspiration.
And it was quite.
I think this one is.
Sorry,
no, please say.
No, it was quite difficult to understand it before it was put together in a way. I mean, because we did the first prototypes ourselves, and it was quite difficult to understand it as a piece of furniture, like what type of effect it had and how it worked in space before we actually assembled it and fixed it. So it has this tension in a way.
Yeah. And I think it became like a principle, so we could make like hundreds of different versions of this. And the low boy, maybe you can see it in the background, but I mean, it doesn't really relate to the story of, I mean, you still have the arch, but it doesn't really relate to the story of the old doors with the panels. But it just became a principle that you could like, and you wanted to explore it and make loads of different versions. So we have a whole stack of them.
There was also something funny about the way that the light traveled through the piece that might also relate to the architecture in a way that it's kind of how do you say, solid, or somewhere, and then other places light kind of traveled through it and really extends the space of the piece in a way. So it transforms really when light comes through. And then we have the series of chairs called the Comparing Conditions, and we've made we also have a ceramic version of this, one in solid oak wood, one in a metal frame with wicker, and one in extruded ceramics, and then all the way out there on the terrace, you see the one in marble. And this was a very it was an idea that Priscilla saw very early in the process. We had, and Dorthe and me have previously worked with extruded ceramics and made pieces that from this old brickmaking machine where we had made formwork and kind of extruded these large, long beams out and finished them by hand to create these donut-like bricks. And for a long time, we had been fascinated by how we could use that machine or that process.
And even the formworks as well, right? That we had already made for another project.
Exactly. And then we were able to envision the ceramic chair in a way and use the formwork and use the machine. And it became this very non-functional ceramic chair because this one doesn't have a seat, but it kind of defined our 3 arches that makes the chair.
Yeah. It's more like the idea of a chair, right? That you look at it, and it could be like a children's drawing of a chair. It's like, yeah, it has 4 legs and a back, but not more than that.
Exactly. And then the idea or the series developed in a way to use the same form and repeat the form, but change the material into the wood, the wicker, the marble, and kind of also for us study how the different materials set their mark on the functionality or the expression of the chair. And in this case, we had the opportunity to kind of play with the inside and outside as well of the Schindler House, because it's these open spaces where you can kind of extend the exterior and take it inside, or you can extend the interior and invite it outside. So we also had that in mind when exploring with the materials.
And I think what became quite important in this process with the different materials was that, I mean, we had the 3 arches from the first one that was like the version 1, which was in ceramic and stoneware, but then connecting the rest of them with a seat, it just didn't feel, it just couldn't be the same seat in each material, because I mean, the wicker, you couldn't make this, like the second one was the wooden one, and you wouldn't be able to make these details that you have in the wood. I mean, they would get lost in the wicker version, and it would also be really complicated to make this seat in wicker. And in marble, you just have this really heavy material, and you also want to show it. So it became this very strict
Slab.
Slab that was just placed on top of the 2 smaller arches. So the material somehow also, I mean, they didn't dictate it, but it felt like the material was very much part of the decisions made regarding the seats, because the materials just didn't speak the same language. And I think that was really interesting for us. Yeah.
I have a technical question.
Yeah.
What's the joint on the ceramic? There's a vertical member and like the chair leg member. What is the connection like between those 2?
Steel. Steel dowels with a little bit of glue in it. Yeah.
So one of the things that I think is remarkable about your body of work is your use of ceramics in a way that is like native to its properties, oftentimes, like using clay, interfacing with other materials. And when you do that, oftentimes it seems like you're using like the inherent properties of ceramics, like its strength and compression. And I love seeing that. Because it's not similar to, like, I have this desire to, like, in my own practice, like interface, like leverage ceramics against wood, for example, and use compression and tension together. so it's exciting to see that in your work as well.
It's also often really difficult, but I guess it's because we don't know that it's difficult before we throw ourselves into it, because we're not ceramists, right? We've been working with stoneware, especially for quite a long time, but we actually don't really know the limits, because we always persuade somebody into doing what we're thinking. So it's we're not getting wiser in that way. In that sense, I have to say, we still always try to make projects that are not. Yeah, we need to persuade somebody into doing them for us. Yeah.
I think you're having success. It's amazing to. I mean, I think I love when people who aren't like classically trained ceramicists use clay, because exactly as you said, they don't have like a preconceived notion of what's kind of appropriate and possible.
I mean, sometimes it doesn't work, right? Sometimes it's it might work for a show or something like that, but then when you actually want to use it like that, then you get in trouble, right? So I mean, we love working with the stoneware and like ceramists. We've been working with the same thrower, is it called that? For a very long time, and he's really talented. And other than that, we've been working with this brick extrusion machine. Yeah, so that's like the two ways for us it's to go about it. And of course, both the people working with the extrusion machine and the thrower, they know us by now, and I mean, we have in that sense, it also gets easier, right?
But
we also learn. We do learn.
Yeah, but most time it is a freedom not to be restricted kind of by the do's and the don'ts, or what is traditional use of the material. In that sense, we're uninformed in a way, so we can step in and say something that's extremely difficult, or we can really challenge the way you would traditionally do things. And it's been a very good freedom, but I think also at times these professionals have kind of pulled their hair and been like, so this is actually not possible, or you need to understand this way of doing things. And we kind of always push them just a little bit, like Dorthe says, and kind of, could we try? So it also means sometimes a lot of failed attempts because what we want often is so intuitive. It's something that, it's difficult to put words into, because we don't have the technical skills always to explain what it is we're after. So it is a kind of try again, and just to see if we can make them understand through several attempts, right? So we also have like a few steps going there. Yeah.
And I think we would also, the more you work with clay and ceramic, you also have a desire to learn it yourself. And I think it's, we do all the wooden pieces, we do ourselves, definitely version 1. So in that sense, it's, it's like the other half, we don't have our fingers into it. Sometimes you also learn something from the machine, or the process was what I wanted to say. Yeah.
I'd love to ask, I feel like we've touched on this, or you've touched on this a bit, but your approach, maybe Alex, if you have a thought about this, in your material-based practice, what is your approach to functionality? And MBADV, I think you've both kind of spoken to this, but what is everyone's approach to functionality?
You go ahead, Alex.
It's a broad question. I I make objects. I've done a few like spatial projects, and yeah, I think, and I also make sculpture, and I think that I approach each of those like typologies and scales like with the same rigor, and I think something that with like the squarely like utilitarian objects, something that has been a driving motivator in the last 5 or 6 years, I think, is like to expand the notion of like the utilitarian ceramic object outside of the scope of like the potter's wheel, or even the like vessel, but kind of ask myself like what other types of utilitarian ceramic objects one can make as a designer or even like as a potter that aren't based on food, or food, I guess, or like the language of the potter's wheel. And so that has driven me to engage, like I've been working on a series of like puzzles, like ceramic puzzles.
They're beautiful.
Oh, thank you so much.
They really are, yeah.
And so that's yeah, it's a functional utilitarian object made the same way, with the same materials that one would make like a vase or something, but uses the kind of the simplest or the dumbest way of touching clay is just like squishing it with your hands. But through careful study of one's materials and understanding the rate in which things shrink, that you can achieve something like really kind of complex or sophisticated with like really simple materials. And that's been fun to figure out.
It's funny, the vessel is really also like one of the things that we discuss a lot, because we make things also out of clay sometimes that are not that functional, that are more like, sculptural. But because we are an architect and a designer, we are often asked like, so what is it for? And I think we took like the vase or the vessel like a small hostage, what is called hostage, because I mean the vessel or the vase, it doesn't really have a function, right? I mean, you could put flowers in it, but you can also just have a vessel or a vase standing, and you're like, everybody is fine with that function, and it's not. And I mean, the things that we make are not more functional or less functional than that. So I've actually made a couple of projects where the vessel has been like a building block. And then now we've also a new project coming that looks like the outside of a vase, like the, what do you call it, the silhouette of a vase, but it's actually a table or a small, what do you call that, tray?
Tray, yeah.
Plate.
Pedestal, like a small pedestal.
Yeah, and then one is actually a vessel, but it's not, or a vase, but it's the silhouette is different from the vase inside this weird shape. So this is like something that we're discussing a lot, because this, like a lot of ceramists, they are not they can like make the same year after year, like exploring, and I love it, and I don't want them to do anything else, but they're never questioned, right? They're not questioned what is the function of what you're doing. And I think we got a little provoked, because we feel that there are room for other kinds of objects in our houses and homes and in our surroundings that are not necessarily a plate or a cup, or so I think the vessel is really also something that we are discussing quite a lot, because it's an odd kind of function nowadays, right? Like it had a function once, but it's not really like that anymore. Yeah.
And I also like the way you start describing, Alex, what you do, and you go from object to kind of a piece, or you use different ways to describe it, where it's somehow it's not a design, or it's not, I mean, it's something, it's a sculpture, or and we've explored the same type of language in order to free ourselves from the functionality in a way. So almost being closer to art sometimes, or just like a free way of exploring the form and the formwork and the material and the craft as well. And of course, also the functionality. So it's kind of these different levels that are in play, or kind of you turn up the volume a little bit on the functionality. So it's, I mean, we've actually, I think, created that in order to explore the function, and also to the viewers or the users, or how you call them, that it's to open up that way of understanding what can function actually be. Can a function be to make us have a conversation about material or about formwork? Is functionality also in the application of craft and design in a way, so that we are able to have conversations about what do we surround ourselves with, in order, when we talk about materials and formwork that is pleasing, or why is it pleasing, or why is it not pleasing, or I mean, so it's also in a way a lot of those conversations we've had for years, like what is design and craft and architecture, what is the functionality of that? Is that also to make us have conversations and kind of push the boundaries of what everyone else understands it to be?
Yeah, ceramics has such a, of course, such a long history across the world, and I think it's like thrilling to be able to engage with that history and make something that is hard to place. It's kind of an impossible task, but it's amazing to work towards it, to like make an object that that spans different kind of categories, and is at first glance maybe hard to place, like what is that for, what's it doing.
And it's also, if you're attempting to make a cup that looks different or new or feels new, then it's also difficult, right? If that's your goal, when you already know that it's gonna be a cup, then you're already, I mean, I think that's what Maria and I are trying, is that we make projects because, I mean, they are very intuitive, a lot of the things that we are making, but then we also don't just leave them. We always explore them again, and then they often tend to become more and more functional. So I think for us, it's also a way of generating new objects or new formwork or shapes or silhouettes, and it's like a way of freeing yourself from the function, because it's otherwise you just, but for us it's definitely difficult to think a cup in a completely new way without having a lot of work before that that doesn't have anything to do with the cup. So for us, function is this thing that we are, I mean, we love function. It's not that's not the problem at all. It's just our project. I mean, we are also more engaged with the projects before they become, like, before they are completed, because when the function is there, then they are like completed somehow. You have the form, you have the function, you have the material, everything is like settled then. But for us, it's really exciting when the function is less present, because then there's still room to develop the project.
It
Yeah.
strikes me too, looking at this image of the Schindler House, how the house kind of does that or did that as well. It was like,
Yeah, you're right.
kind of invented or proposed, maybe is a better word, unique typology of like multifamily housing. At that time, it's kind of hard to place. Yeah.
No, but
Yeah,
you're
it's
right. A sketched idea almost, or like a something proposed in a new way of understanding the way of living together, right? Or kind of composing your own space.
I mean, from the plan, it's not like, I mean, we've been looking at the plan, but it's not obvious for me how it was used back then. I mean, it is very open, right? I mean, there aren't like one space where you're like, this is the living room, or yeah.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, you're right. It's like, it's more about the spaces in itself than it's about what it was actually meant to contain. And you could probably inhabit this house in like a lot of different ways.
Yeah, and I know just in terms of how it was at least originally inhabited was like, right, like Sage can probably fill us in more, but like two couples of two individuals, and each individual had their own room. Like that's still kind of very unusual in 2020 or 2021.
Yeah, definitely. But there are 2 fireplaces, right? Or is there only one?
There are
Inside?
seven places throughout the house. There's one in each studio, and 2 outdoors, and then 1 in the guest studio as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just as you're saying, the design was not, the spaces weren't designated in the way that they are often, like this is a bedroom or this is a living room or something like that. They were just given over to the residents, and the idea was that they would be used as studios and filled however the occupant wanted to, and then refilled and changed again as the occupants shifted, and or as even the desires of one occupant shifted. Yeah. I wonder, speaking of the Schindler House, and Alex, you've also presented work here. I'm curious how you are working in relationship with the conditions of the house, or how it's made reference, or how it has become a reference in your work. And then even beyond just Schindler, what other references you pull from in your work, or yeah.
Well, let's see. For when I presented work at the house, of course, it was like for me, it was a unique opportunity to work in respect to like a historical context. And I love history, and so I took it kind of as like a research opportunity to learn about the house, learn about Schindler, and I very consciously like wanted to present the work in a way that sort of a nod to like its domesticity. So I presented like I didn't want to bring any pedestals into the space, of course, and I wanted to just like engage the floor. So a lot of my work most of the work was just like placed directly on the floor. And I guess currently I'm in a show at actually the VDL house, Neutra VDL house, that opens next month. And I definitely thought a lot about my experience showing at the Schindler House, and wanted to, so I kind of remade something that was already existing at the Nurture House and changed it. And yeah, I think my approach, at least right now, in terms of like dealing with a historic site, seems to be like just changing something slightly, as opposed to using it as a way to present something that's external to that space. But I don't know, I've been thinking about and working kind of with architecture to in a certain extent lately. Like I've been making drawings more of the work and of the designs, and that's really exciting to me. It's like, it makes me a little nervous because there's not really an audience or a point in making kind of architectural drawings of your object work, because no one's asking for that. But
for your own little archive, I mean, it must be great. You'll always, even if the piece is sold or somehow, then you can remake it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's exciting to me. It's just it opens another way of like seeing the project as instead of solely just the finished object and it existing through photographs or the object itself, but exploring different ways of like describing the object and seeing the object is a kind of an exciting challenge to me. So been working on.
You would also just be very quick, or because you have the craft, right? So you would always be able to just very quickly go into the material and test, even if it was just in scale, or I mean, you would get the answer quite quickly from the material. So I guess, I mean, to me, it sounds like the drawing is a good place to be, because it's, I mean, it doesn't tell you the answers right away, right? So it kind of, it leaves you to explore something, I guess, earlier on.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's funny for us to hear, because our projects doesn't exist until we've made a drawing, right? So, I mean, even a cabinet maker would have to make the drawing before he can actually make I mean, as a ceramist, it's like it's just more free than maybe any other craft.
Yeah, it is. And I try, in my work lately, I'm trying to like leverage both sides, like the freedom of just working directly in clay, and then also like I use the computer often, like to do design in and with, and just trying to do both simultaneously and like play one off the other is really exciting to me.
Yeah,
I can imagine.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
Yeah. Will you tell me about your practice as a whole, like in terms of how you work together, and yeah, how you kind of, how you work together?
Yeah, I mean, it's very much with the pen and paper, I would say. I mean, often one of us have an idea, or it might be very small, and it might not, like one thing just leads to the other. I mean, doesn't even have to be very thought through. But yeah, very much sketching and talking, and we often have like a lot of projects that are not unfinished or haven't even begun yet, but they are somewhere in drawings, existing somewhere in a drawing. Yeah, and then some are like developed to a state like where it's still purely sculptural, and then we actually make them, and others, they become more functional before we actually make them. So it's very, yeah, Yeah, maybe you also have something to add. It's like very much, I think in the beginning it was very much Maria being a designer and me being an architect. So it was like either very much a piece of furniture or very much spatial. And then as the years went by, it became like our language. So it wasn't like either or.
No, it became something else. I think it was, as Dorthe says, kind of defined by our different background to begin with. That was also a reference point for each of us to understand why we kind of stepped into this joint formwork, like what comes from what area, what came from architecture, what came from furniture design. And then as we experienced that people connected to our work and that whatever we were doing in a way kind of sat with people and made them reflect, it also, I think, gave us the confidence to keep on having those conversations. And as we got to know both each other better and kind of got to know the way of working together, it was also so much easier to, like Dorthe said, just to like place a thought or a material or a surface or like a symbol. It's not like any of a sketch to perfection, but I mean like as a very quick sketch, and you would feel if there was a response from the other person. So I think we've developed a method of working where we've actually done that, tried to strengthen the other's idea, even though, let's say, we weren't maybe fascinated by it to begin with, then it's kind of also taking those 10, 20 steps together in order to explore if the idea is really strong. So it's also, yeah, I think we've developed that instead of kind of holding on to each our area, like, so this is design, this is architecture, then we've developed a way of moving together and just strengthening the projects. And it's but it's taken a lot of years, right, to figure out how to work like that. So it's
but it's also very intuitive. It's not
but
like
it's strange that two people can be intuitive together in a way. So that's, I mean, that's something you usually are by yourself. So I mean, in this sense, it is quite unique to have developed that together, like a joint language of doing that process. Sorry, I interrupted you, Dorthe.
No.
I think
Do you always work alone, Alex?
I go back and forth. Like after I graduated from undergrad, I worked alone for a year, kind of in a traditional sort of like studio potter kind of method. And I knew that wasn't where I wanted to be. And like, so I wanted to like be a part of something bigger than just myself. And so I got a job working at a ceramics factory in Ohio. And it was a very historic ceramics company that made architectural ceramics and also like very beautiful, like hand painted, like decorative pieces. And I didn't have the language at the time to really even know that this was a job description, but I wanted to be like the art director, like the chief designer, but I didn't really have a resume at the time for it. So I ended up, they put me to work in the mold making area, like the plaster area. And it was amazing because I learned so much technical skill.
Yeah.
And so I did that for a year, and then I came to California and I worked for a ceramics company here called Heath Ceramics, and worked in design, like as a junior designer and supporting artist projects at Heath. And I always saw it as a part of my practice, even though it was like employment for someone else. I never really separated the two, and also kept working on like self-directed, self-initiated projects outside of Heath. So I guess in some ways, like working for other people for me has been a type of collaboration. But yeah, currently I'll work. There's I've done one. I did this like rammed earth project about a year ago in Los Angeles, and I collaborated with an architect then, and it was quite fun to work with someone who cares as much about the project as you do. Like, it's really hard to find that person.
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
So when you can find someone that cares as much as you do, it's amazing like what you can accomplish together.
Yeah.
You're right.
That's true. Yeah, that's very
It's
true.
funny. We are making a big project in Chicago with the rammed earth.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, but we are not there making it ourselves. We are a group of 4, and yeah, the other 2 they're in Chicago right now ramming.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work, so it's very smart for you guys to stay away.
No, I wish I was there. Yeah, but yeah, well, wait and see. Hopefully we can go at some point and see it.
Yeah. So we have just a few minutes of our conversation left, and I wonder if you have any final reflections on your contribution to the exhibition or on this conversation before we wrap up.
I think even though we didn't get to experience it ourselves, I think it's been fantastic to put our work into this historic framework in a way that the house and the history of the house is so present in the full exhibition compared to a white cube or gallery or museum space or traditional exhibition spaces. So I mean that in many ways, I think that there has been like an extra layer added to our pieces that we of course would have loved to experience ourselves, but have had to kind of experience through video and photos, and you get a sense of it. But yeah, that has been a great experience.
I think in these photos that we've seen, it's also like they don't seem as odd as maybe they do in an art gallery, or they seem a little bit more down to earth, a little bit more what do you say? It's easier to engage with them because they are in this context where it's a house where people actually lived. So I think, yeah, that made them more accessible, the pieces, I think. And I really like that.
Yeah,
it gives it an extra layer. I think the chair becomes more like a chair, and the other pieces also seem more furniture-like. Yeah, but it's been great.
For your participation both in the exhibition but in the conversation today. And Alex, thank you for joining us. You'll join us for
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too. I'll send an email. I want to see photos of the Rammed Earth project.
There's an Instagram account. Soilland North Lawndale.